Upon its initial release in 2020, Cyberpunk 2077 burst onto the gaming landscape and onto gamers' machines. It made a huge initial splash, utterly polarizing the gaming community. Because of the bugs and performance issues, many players had completely marred experience. They voiced their malcontent all over the internet, and even the developers CD Projekt Red have suffered losses in the legal realm over the state of the game. Say whatever you want about the experience, of course it is totally up to the player as to whether they enjoy the game or not. However, one thing that's remained consistently awesome throughout the lifetime of the game is its setting, Night City. Join me in this video as I examine what makes Night City so engaging and brilliant, and maybe even a masterpiece. For starters, some backstory is in order. One thing players may not be fully aware of is that Night City is set in the universe of the tabletop role-playing game also known as Cyberpunk, or its second and fourth edition names Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red. These other names help distinguish the game from the genre after which it is named. In this universe, the timeline splits from our reality in the year 1990, and the timeline has only been expanded upon each subsequent edition of the game, with the first edition taking place in 2013 and the fourth set in the year 2045. There are many events that help create the world of Cyberpunk Red, but the main setting for the games is the one and only Night City, which will be the focus of this analysis. Night City is an American megalopolis located somewhere between Los Angeles and San Francisco in the free state of North California. As established in the tabletop games, the area has been ravaged by war between the United States and Central America. This has allowed various megacorporations to sweep in to control the city, and lawlessness has become the norm. Even while there is a force to deal with lawbreakers, it's proven ineffective against the throngs of criminals that call the city home. While the criminals fight for the streets, the megacorporations are embroiled in conflict amongst themselves, vying for ultimate control and global dominance. Night City is jam-packed with skyscrapers and home to around 5 million residents. The tabletop games have established this fictional city as a fully fledged and well thought out setting for their games to take place in. They also explore the earlier history of the city from 2013 to 2045. The Night City player's experience in 2077 is set 32 years ahead of the same city in the latest edition of the tabletop games. There exists a Night City sourcebook, a 186-page document that details nearly every aspect of Night City, from the districts and street signs to nightlife culture and drug use. It is in this document that the creators of the game, Artalsorian Games, outline what exactly makes the setting so unique, while describing it in detail of what the city is really like. While the city has undergone some major changes to make it suitable for the video game medium, it still holds true towards its source material. The creator of the tabletop games, Mike Pondsmith, has made a few maps over the years, and you can easily compare them to the Night City we see in 2077. As you can see, the city has been expanded and more fleshed out, but it still includes all of the various neighborhoods we see in the tabletop game. The outskirts of the city also feature in the video game as an addition to the world, further adding to immersion and the believability of the setting. This adherence to its source material is, in my opinion, a big reason that makes CD Projekt Red's Night City so enthralling. They're able to take an already established world and add colorful and material changes that fit incredibly in the world of Cyberpunk Red. The setting really feels like a true extension of Pondsmith's creation from all those years ago, and CD Projekt Red has brought it to life. The aesthetic and design of the city is second to none and stands up there with the likes of Cyberpunk Legends, Blade Runner, and Akira. From Corpo Plaza to Haywood and Pacifica, every square inch of the city bleeds the style of the genre it takes as its namesake, Cyberpunk. The looming monoliths of the city gleam with neon eyes as the player traverses Night City, taking V to the heights of Arasaka to solve their problem with Johnny's personality engram. Even if one doesn't take it upon themselves to finish the storyline for whatever reason, they can't help but get lost in the aesthetic of the city. When the game first released, the feel of the city may have been lost to some. However, as most of the bugs have been ironed out, the full impact of Night City can now be realized. There are 6 distinct regions of the city, all representing unique looks of the gangs and cultures that reside there. For example, Watson is very run down and full of cyberpsychos and lawlessness. It's run by Maelstrom and fully suits the group's design. Then you have Japantown, home of the Tiger Claws and the Arasaka Parade. It's obviously heavily inspired by Japanese art and culture, and is one of the most standout districts in the city. At the center of the city you have Corpo Plaza, home to the tallest buildings in the city, and it's from here that the megacorps like Kangtao or Arasaka maintain their dominance over the city and its subjects. The area is clean and very advanced looking compared to the rest of the city. It stands as the polar opposite of regions like Watson or Pacifica. Aside from looking unique, these districts also house landmarks of the city, from parks to clubs and even gang hideouts. As you clear the map of mission objectives, the player forms memories and connections to the landscape of Night City. And if the city's design was done poorly, it wouldn't have nearly this kind of effect or impact on them. It is the fact that Night City's design and aesthetic is done so well, the setting stands out not only within the genre of cyberpunk, but within gaming as a whole. Night City helps drive the narrative too. The main storyline, even in some sections, I would argue comes secondary to the world building and setting, further driving home how important it was to CD Projekt Red to adapt and design such an incredible city. The narrative begins by illustrating how the player character V comes to find themselves living in Night City, relative to which backstory the player chooses. The first 4 to 6 hours of the game are spent establishing the setting and getting the player connected to the world which the narrative is to play out. It's the setting and its quality that help make these hours the most standout in the game, and it's no surprise that most players are fond of the experience through the first act. While the narrative slows down a pace in the following act, the setting still powers through, carrying the story as players are introduced to new characters like Pan Am and locations in the city like Clouds and Lizzie's Bar. Speaking of Pan Am, the narrative once again proves secondary to the setting as the player is introduced to the nomads on the outskirts of the city in pursuit of Hellman, and once again gets a taste of Corpo blood, downing a Kangtao AV. It seems like at every turn the setting is parallel to the plot, and both only seek to validate one another. The less believable one is, the other suffers as a counterpart. If Night City wasn't so perfectly crafted, no player would find V's journey compelling, and as such, would find little reason to play the game. Even when not doing any missions, I find myself driving and sprinting around the city, enjoying the vistas, all while grinning like a Cheshire cat out of sheer immersion and pure delight at how amazing the city is. In the third act, the plot picks back up a bit and sees players performing a suicide operation, sneaking onto a float housing Hanako Arasaka during the Japantown parade. In preparation for this mission, the setting further aids the narrative. V and Takamura infiltrate a massive and highly guarded Arasaka warehouse where the floats are located. In the shadow of the city, the player makes a decision on how to approach their operation. The set piece of the warehouse gives players a few options as to how they want to accomplish this. They can take the route of least resistance and sneak through the whole thing, whether through the underground tunnel or on the far side through the vent. Or they could of course go guns blazing through the front gate, taking on a ton of guards and even a mech that patrols the perimeter. There aren't many missions with this much player agency, and while the plot decisions often have little impact on the narrative as a whole, the setting in this case empowers the player with choice where the plot falls short. The following mission is the big heist, and it plays out relatively opposite to how the previous mission did. It's rather linear, with little choices for the player to make. They have to take out 3 snipers in a straight-ish path along the parade route. When this is done, they unplug the netrunner, deal with Oda, and watch Takamura fail to persuade Hanako over the net. While as I said, this mission is straightforward, it is among the most aesthetically pleasing and enjoyable missions in the entire game. Of course, I was pretty drawn into and overwhelmed by Night City before this, but it wasn't until this mission that I was fully engaged and validated in my belief about how good Night City really is. In conjunction to the main storyline, there is undoubtedly a ton of side content. These often feel like just filler, especially things like the NCPD blips and some of the gigs. However, a lot of these side missions add a lot to Night City as a package. Some introduced new indoor locations for players to navigate, like clubs and workshops. These help further develop Night City and give players more options when tackling specific objectives, like in the main story, occasionally. It can feel pretty grindy and can really bear down on players due to just how much side content there is, but if you really get down to it, Night City would be worse off without all of it. Even the graffiti in the game helps to flesh out the city and add some more lore to the landscape. There's some missions and content that really shines though. What comes to mind here is specifically all of the cyber psychos. Not once was I unimpressed with one of these missions. They all take place in various unique sections of the city and usually have some sort of arena that the engagement plays out in. They're all incredibly fun and add much more depth to not only the lore but Night City as a whole. You get the sense that the city somehow has something to do with the psycho's madness. In fact, the city may just be as psycho as the poor souls V stumbles upon. Of course, however, Night City isn't perfect. It has its own problems, detractions, and shortcomings. For starters, the verticality is a big issue. In a world so rooted in cyberpunk, it's almost a necessity to have the vertical plane play a huge role in your set. Cyberpunk 2077 has very little in terms of verticality. There are some sections where you ride an elevator up a skyscraper, but all too often is the player just met with an indoor location like a bar or club to explore. While this isn't all bad, there is a seriously missed opportunity to showcase the city while adding some of its highly impactful atmosphere. The player can see scripted AVs flying all over the city and train cars riding on tracks halfway up the skyline, but none of these make it as a feature of the game. For the vast majority of the game, V is stuck on the ground, constantly gazing up at the dominating skyline, wishing they could only see the city from a new angle. The next big issue facing Night City is its lack of interactability. This means that there is little for the player to engage with outside of the main and side content. You can't even eat at the plethora of food stands and shops across the city. There isn't even an animation for eating outside of a few scripted sections in the story. At least GTA has a lot of additional interactions to help make the city feel alive. It would be an incredibly important addition to the game to add new interactabilities. It's not all bad, however. With the new patch, CD Projekt Red has added new apartments and with them new interactions, which still fall short of where the game needs to be, but indicates where CD Projekt Red is at least trying to do something about it, adding entirely new content. This means too that they could add additional content to tackle the verticality problem, but who knows, only time will tell. Overall, Night City is an absolute package. There's just so much atmosphere and emotions the city captures, and in cyberpunk fashion throws into the player's face. It's all imposing, flashy, and dystopian, and fully captures the essence of the genre of cyberpunk art. It takes its source material and expands it to new depths, adapting the tabletop game to a video game format. Furthermore, the world of Night City helps push forward the main narrative, all while being stocked full of juicy side content for players to sink their teeth into, getting a fuller image of the scope of the city. There are problems that face Night City's design, however. The severe lack of verticality in the city is a major issue, especially as the city just teases you constantly over this fact. Whether or not the problems are ironed out, though, Night City still stands up there with the legends, both of gaming and art. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Let's have discussions about Night City down in the comments, and until the next one, take care.